Hello and welcome back. It's time to get into retouching the bag. So we're going to be using frequency separation retouching in this section to make sure basically the overall tone of the bag looks right. We're also going to be working a little bit on our texture. We're going to clean up the edge and we're going to be doing some blemish removal. So let's go ahead and get back in. Now I took a quick break, and as I did so, holding shift and clicking on the before and after for this layer mask, what I'm noticing is that although these lines here do look super nice and straight, or, like a really nice curve, when I hold shift and click on the bag, these little imperfections around here and over here, they make the bag look a little bit more real. So what I'm realizing is we just want to change our pen path a little bit. But we've got really great workflow going on, so it's not a big deal at all. What we're going to do is hold shift and click on the layer mask for the bag. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom in. We'll go back to our paths. Remember, we already made this path, and this is where I cut all this stuff off, right? But it's not a big deal. We can just change this path. So let's hit P for the pen tool. I'm gonna hold Control or Command and click right here, and then you can just click and add points wherever you need them. So for instance, I want a little point to be right there. We're gonna just add a little point right there. There we go. Let's add a point right there. Hold Control or Command and bring that out. There we are. Looking good. And then we'll do the same thing right up here. Actually, I'm just gonna move that point there. Let's click there to add a little point. There we are. Kind of move that out there a little bit more. So now I'm kind of purposely adding a little bit more imperfection, or a little bit more like a ridge to the edge of the bag. Again, just because I think it's gonna just look a little bit better. Okay, so we went on that side, and on this side you can see I'm gonna click here, hold Control or Command, and just pull that right out. There we go. And I think that's looking really nice. So now what we can do is just hold Control or Command. We can click on our pen path, go back to our channels. Okay, now because we have some selected outside and some selected inside, I'm just gonna use my brush tool to paint black, because right now we're selecting out here, right? So I wanna paint black out there. We're gonna inverse my selection by hitting Shift Command I, and then we're gonna paint white inside of there. There we go. And because we used a really great, workflow, that was very easy to do. So we're still cut out super well. Very, very easy to do. I can still change my background at any time. And my path updated along with all of that. So, any changes that you need to make to your pen path should be very easy to do. Okay. And at this point, I think that does help it look a little bit more realistic. It was just looking like a little bit too fake. So we're looking good. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer here. We're gonna start off with blemish removal, okay? Just standard blemish removal. And for this, we're gonna use the spot healing brush tool, which is my preferred tool for just standard blemish removal. You got a little spot, you want it gone, spot healing brush tool is the way to go. There we go. Kind of take care of some of this. Now, I'm not trying to make the edge look totally perfect in this case, because the edge here is, there we go. That little frayed look is kind of part of the look. Now, as I zoom in here, I'm gonna hold shift and click on this bag. We have one more choice here. This leather here, because we do have a pretty supple leather edge, I'm actually kind of debating possibly just leaving the edge of the leather. If we decide to do that, it's actually pretty easy to do. I'm gonna hold shift and click on the layer mask. We'll use our magic wand tool. So W for the magic wand tool. There we go. We'll go to sample all layers here. And I'm just gonna select right outside of the bag here. Okay, same thing there. I'm gonna go to select and mask. My little view, let's just go to overlay. Okay, that looks pretty good. We'll just feather this by a tiny bit and then add a little bit of contrast. Okay, and then this is going to output to the selection, which is what we want. So we selected out there. I'm going to inverse my selection and then just paint this white here. So this is one of those cases where we totally did just pen tool all this stuff, and now I'm kind of like undoing that. And the reason I'm undoing that is because I think all these little imperfections actually like really inform us quite a bit about the bag itself. So I'm choosing to like leave all these little details in there. And I think it's just giving us a little bit more accurate of an idea of the bag itself. All right, there we go. Cool, I'm gonna leave down there, but up there, I think that just helps out and just makes it look a little bit more realistic. Okay, now we're looking great. So the next thing we wanna do, we've got the shape of the bag pretty good. We wanna even out, we need to work on the texture up here because we stretched that, if you remember. And we want to even out the general tone of the bag itself. So this is a great time for frequency separation. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. We'll go to Window and down to our Actions. And by this time, you've probably already loaded your frequency separation action that's included with this tutorial. If you have not, no big deal. Just go to this little menu icon right here. Go to Load Actions. And then here in the tutorial, your downloads, you can go to Photoshop Actions, Frequency Separation Actions, and hit Open. It'll open it up right here. So this is an 8-bit image. We're going to click where it says Frequency Separation 8-bit and hit Play. Let's hit Continue there, and we want to blur this so we can't see the texture anymore. There we go, and right there is perfect, like 10 pixels. Yeah, that's perfect. Let's hit OK. All right, and continue. All right, there we go. And I think we actually may have had a selection active. So let's just delete that. Make sure you deselect first, because I was like, what's going on here? Let's just turn our background off too. There we go, turn the background off. We'll just make the background white for now. Okay, there we go. Let's go ahead and click here on the 8-bit. So we'll hit play again, 10 pixels again. I had a selection active before, that's what messed it up. Okay, so now we have our frequency separation. We have our high frequency and the low frequency. Now, the deal is this frequency separation is outside of my bag group, and my bag group has my layer mask, okay? So what I wanna do is just open up my bag group and move this frequency separation right into the bag, and then it's defined by the mask. So then again, you can see I can just change my background color however I want, and my frequency separation is now inside. So really good workflow here, because by putting just the mask on the group, anything I put inside of this group is just going to be visible right there. We did all of our compositing, and we did all of our like liquefy and moving things around and whatnot. We did that when we first started. The reason here, and it may be becoming more clear, is because I wanted to just create a layer mask that would work for the bag no matter what I did to this bag. And that's what we have here. But let's say we made this layer mask and it was perfect, and then I decided to move the straps. Well, I'd have to change the layer mask to accommodate the new placement of those straps as well. So that's why we did all that stuff to start with. Okay, just kind of bringing it all back in here, making sure that like workflow wise, you're like, oh, cool, that makes sense. Okay, now we have our frequency separation ready to go. So we're gonna start by creating a layer between these two layers. We'll just use our brush tool, B for the brush tool, sample just a large brush here. And again, I'm gonna go to my sampler. We're gonna use a 5x5 average. Back to the brush tool, we're gonna sample and simply start painting. And I'm using a 10% flow here, just a super low flow. There we go. And my goal is to just kind of smooth out transitions from highlights and shadows. Just kind of smooth this out a little bit more. Make the bag, you know, get rid of like the inconsistencies in the bag where it kind of looks like it's got little like bulges and things like that. All right, There we go. Let's zoom out and see even more. See, there's like a dark little patch that's running through right there. We can take care of that. All right, that's looking great. There's a before and after with that already, looking really good. Let's do another layer. You can make as many of these layers as you want. Now, we don't need to go too smooth on this because we do want to show all this nice texture. There we go. That's looking really good there as well. Want to be sure that we don't cover up. I'm going to grab the eraser tool, just erase away over top of little details like that. Definitely don't want to cover those up. All right, well, there's a before and after, and already that's looking really, really nice. Let's go ahead and just make our background white. Double click there, bring it all the way to white. The pink was just a little bit distracting for me when I was, while I'm retouching. All right, let's turn those off and back on again. And I think that looks great. Now, we do want to take care of a little crease right there, remember? So we'll create a new layer. Just grab this dark color and paint right over top of there. Okay. And now, this texture here, we can just use that on the high frequency layer. So, let's grab our high frequency layer. We're going to use our clone stamp tool on the layer itself. So, S for the clone stamp tool, where it says sample current layer. That's very important. It has to say current layer there. And then we can just sample any texture that we want from this layer and then paint it in. And check that out. It just becomes a different texture there. So we just got rid of, let's just turn this, I'm going to make my frequency separation in there yellow. So you can see we just got rid of that little point there. Very easy to do, and we still have all the texture that we want. There we go. Let's just make sure we're painting with a slightly darker color. Right under there. And perfect. So you can see we got rid of that little point. Now we can work on this texture up here. So we can take some of this texture from down here. Let's just click on our high frequency. S for the clone stamp tool. We can take some of this texture from down here and simply put it right up there at the top. All right. Or we're getting some other texture over here. So I'm going to sample over here and we can paint over here. And this is, again, this is only going to be texture that we're painting in right now. Okay, so let's grab some of this texture. Now the grain is actually facing out. So I'm gonna go to Window and then down to my clone source. There we go, let's pull this out. And here we can actually flip our clone source. So to flip it, I'm gonna flip on the X axis. So I'm gonna sample over here and it's actually gonna flip on the other side. So now I can sample that texture there and start painting it in here. And we're going to see it's flipped. So we'll sample here where it's starting to get dark. There we go. Let's sample here towards the edge. It's just less texture in general. There we go. And we're simply replacing the texture from one area to another. So you can see we took care of the area that had the pulled out texture, and even at, when we zoom all the way in, it still looks really, really good. Like we have all of the texture totally intact. Let's just pull some of this right down here. All right. Just my very edge, we're going to create a new layer above there and just clone stamp that. So Alt or Option, clone stamp that. Make sure we'll go to current and below now. So I'm outside of my frequency separation. Sometimes, and not often, but sometimes frequency separation can get a little bit tricky right at your edge, and that's what was going on here. That's why I'm just grabbing my regular clone stamp tool. There we go. And that looks great there. So we've fixed all of our texture issues. Now I'm going to go just make sure back in our clone stamp tool, I'm going to unclick flip horizontal. Okay, because we need to come back to that. Now let's continue using our clone stamp tool. I'm on the high frequency layer. Okay, make sure we're sampling current layer. See if it's current and below, you're going to get something like this. You just don't want that. So current layer, close off our clone source. Okay, and I'm just sampling textures here. Now at this time, the clone stamp is working in a similar manner to the healing brush because all I'm working on is texture. So it's not trying to copy color at all, it's just working on texture. And that's kind of what the healing brush tool does. So not the exact same, but similar idea there. All right, so it's really easy for me to replace large areas of texture, and the underlying color is going to stay the same. So you can see texture changes like not only like object by object, but it changes how, depending on the lighting and the shadow conditions. Like this looks really smooth, this looks kind of rough, and this looks medium. It's the same piece of leather. It's just the light that's changed. So you wouldn't want to sample here and paint over here because look, you're getting it rough. So just make sure you're sampling from about the area that it's going to wind up being. There we go. Let's kind of fix that. And on a layer right underneath here, I'll just paint lighter right over there. Beautiful. All right, now I don't want to get rid of all these little like striations and things like that in the leather because it's helping it look unique, but there we go. That's really made quite the difference already. Looking at this, I think we're going to leave the majority of that, the straps, maybe here. There we go. Just clean these up a little bit. There we go. I'm going to do a clone stamp layer on the outside of that because it wasn't working how I wanted it. Again, when you get really close to edges, that's where frequency separation tends to break down a little bit. So if you're real close to an edge and it's just like not working exactly like you want it to, all you have to do is just grab a new clone stamp or healing brush tool and go outside, like go above your high frequency layer, and then you're good. That's it. Real quick fix there. All right, and you can see I can even do the same thing with any textures that I have here on the ground. I'm just clone stamping, but I'm only clone stamping the texture. There we go, same thing there. Super cool. Now I'm just looking, the edge is super, we have a very hard edge right now for the bag in the background. I'm gonna click on the bag itself, okay, the layer mask for the bag. We'll go to Window and down to Properties. And then I'm just gonna feather that layer mask itself. And the nice thing about feathering the mask itself, there you can see, we can feather the mask itself and it just makes the edge just a little bit softer. So you can see there's the before, and we're just kind of making that edge just a little bit softer. It's non-destructive, which I like because you can just bring the feathering back at any time, and it just does a great job. So that's it's a solid way to add some feathering to the edge. I think this bag is looking really great. Now we could use a little bit more like dodging and burning. So let's hit D for our default colors. I'm going to change my layer from normal to soft light, okay? And we'll start off with black down to a flow of about 10%. Just want to get like a little bit more shadow area here on the bottom of the bag. Controller Command T, I'm just going to bring that in a little bit more. And that's just going to help ground the bag itself. Okay, let's grab a new layer. I'm going to paint with white, again on soft light now. We're just going to go right across the top of the bag here. I did a little bit too much there. You can see it kind of looks like a little pouch. So it's just not a big deal. Just hit E for the eraser tool and erase it right away. That's why it helps to kind of zoom out here, and also it helps to use a really low flow. So you can just kind of like very smoothly get that the way you want it to look. There we go. So just added a little bit of light area there. All right, in the dark, so just a little dodge and burn. Kind of enhance the shape a little bit more. I'm going to bring those opacities down to about 80% each of those. Maybe this one will bring down to 60%. Okay. And you'll notice I'm looking at the bag zoomed out. I want to see it as a whole rather than, rather than close up. Let's go ahead and turn our entire frequency separation group on and off. Let's turn that off and back on. We can see that makes a huge difference in the bag itself. It just looks more structured in general, and like does a beautiful job of retaining all of our texture. I think it looks really, really nice. We've just got a little bit more work to do with our straps, and then we're going to be done with this section. And in our last section, we're going to be putting multiple backgrounds on the image. So let's go ahead. We're still in our bag group. Now we're pretty much done with our frequency separation. So let's create a new layer. And I want to smooth this out a little bit, just the transition from light to dark. And I can do so just with my brush tool. If I sample by holding Alt or Option and sample that color there, I can kind of paint with the dark color down to the light area, and the same with the light color going up to the dark area. All right, maybe we'll zoom out just a little bit. Just kind of lightening up this reflection as a whole and getting rid of, that like line there. It's just a little bit distracting. Not to mention that in the instructions, Ross wanted to remove those little details there also. So we're kind of taking care of that at the same time. So just paint right over top of that. Easy. Easy, easy, easy. All right, and I want to see about getting rid of, or at least super reducing this. Okay, there we go. There we go. So that cleaned up a good bit. I'm going to lower the opacity just a little bit to have like just a hint shine back through. All right. Especially when you're doing work on like shadows and reflections and stuff. It's just really, I don't know. A lot of the time that stuff just looks like fake. I'm going to change this layer from normal to lighten, just to make sure it's not darkening anywhere. I just don't want any of this to look fake. There we go. But that's looking pretty good. Let's create a new layer. I'll just hit J for the spot healing brush tool and get rid of that little spot there. Okay. This little shadow there, we're just going to sample this background color and paint right over top of that. Perfect. And this side I'm actually like totally on board with. It was just mainly this side that was like a little bit tricky. All right. There we go. Just working on that little area there. And then I'm going to hit G for the gradient tool. We're going to go from our foreground to transparent gradient, linear gradient, and I'm going to hold Alt or Option and just sample this color here. And on a new layer, make sure we're on a new layer, just paint from the top down a little bit. All right, let's make a selection. M for the marquee tool. Let's just make sure we select there. And just go from the top down. Now we're going to change this layer blend mode from normal to darken. What that's going to do is just going to make sure it doesn't show up over top of the bag. And let's just transition this down. I'm going to hit Controller Command L for our levels, and we'll just make our darks a little darker. There we go. Controller Command T to bring that up just a little bit. So it's a darken. There we are. Just want to see if I can smooth this out. Let's hold Alt or Option and click on our layer mask here. Can we smooth out that little line that we have under there? I'm still making it look good. Yeah, it's a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit too dark. Let's try the opposite way. Instead of trying to make the dark area, come down there, let's just make the white light area go back up. Okay, so this obviously, that's just the underside of the bag and the shadow there. We kind of need that. Mostly I'm just want to get rid of this line. All right, let's try the blur tool. On a new layer, we're going to hit Sample All Layers and bring up our strength. There we go. And just paint over here with the good old-fashioned blur tool. See if we can kind of smooth this line out, especially for the shadow area. There we go. Just kind of blurring that a little bit. Keep it from being such a hard edge. All right, and then on a new layer, we're just going to grab our brush tool and then paint with like a low flow, about 10%. Just kind of paint that back in there a little bit. Just let that kind of fade. So we did the blur to kind of help it like fade visually, and now I'm just grabbing this light color and helping that fade in as far as our light is concerned. All right, let's grab a new layer, slightly larger brush. Just gonna paint this visible, which is working pretty well actually. I just want to make sure I have the option to mask it out of the bag. That's why I created a new layer. There's nothing wrong with creating a bunch of new layers, by the way. I use tons and tons of layers, because every layer is like another chance for you to put a mask or change your blending mode or your opacity. So every layer just like expands your options and keeps your editing non-destructive. So I'm a big proponent of just make as many layers as you want. Don't even worry about it. Okay, now let's put a layer mask on there. There we go. Mask out for the bottom of our bag there. I'm going to hold shift and just go straight across the bottom there. Okay. There we are. That looks pretty good. Just kind of smoothing that down a little bit. I still wanted to make sure it looks real. Let's just create a new layer above that. I'm going to grab this color and kind of change the layer from normal down to darken. Or let's go to multiply. Nope, darken is better. I don't want it to show up darker than the bag. And there we go. Now I'm going to grab a lighter color and paint it right in there. That's just not going to show up because it's a darken blend mode. Very nice. There we have a very nice bottom to our bag. Here is just a little bit much. Let's create a new layer. Just with our brush tool, just gonna sample this color and kind of paint little swirls in there. All right, let's group all those together. Got to pop a layer mask on there because you can see I'm losing a little bit of definition here, which I can't do that for my bag. The shadow itself, I can have it be blurry, but the bag, it's got to have all the definition. All right, making shadows. All right, and then we got to mask that off for the bag also. Good deal. Yeah, shadow looks good on both sides. All of our details are in there. And the bag as a whole looks great. Turn that frequency separation off and on. Big help there. Okay, let's go ahead and group all these other layers together and we can close our bag. So super well organized. We have our background and all of our unused stuff back there. And I think that looks great. So we're almost done. We got one more section to go. We're gonna be putting a couple of new backgrounds in here, a little bit more cleanup, and we'll be done. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next section.